Hi lollies, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Belinda's channel. Thank you for all the love and support. Don't forget to please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so that anytime I upload videos, you'll be the first person to be notified. To my returning subscribers, to those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and also educate each and every one of ours. You guys are the real MVP. So lovely. If you come across this video for you, and I start to share with them for people are still reacting to the fact about being so upset and so thought that the plantation actually burned down.
Oh, you mean he was rich enough that he could afford to buy the entire family, man, woman, and children, and then proceed to have them all work for him on this sugar plantation, which, if you didn't know, was some of the most brutal conditions on plantations in the South. But you're posing this as if he was so gracious.
He had the most in this region, and that's because when he purchased a slave, if the slave had a wife and children, he'd buy the whole family so that they would never be separated. And so that was good for them.
Oh, you mean he was rich enough that he could afford to buy the entire family, man, woman, and children, and then proceed to have them all work for him on this sugar plantation, which, if you didn't know, was some of the most brutal conditions on plantations in the South. But you're posing this as if he was so gracious and so generous that he didn't want the family separated. So that was good for them. When actuality, they were all put to work. Despite the fact that they were young, old, husband, wife, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. They were all put to work because he had money to be able to do that.
Then in the village, he built a cottage for each of those families so they didn't have to share with multiple families and squeeze into one space. That was good too.
When you say he built, you meant he had his slaves build, and you said cottages, but what you actually meant was slave quarters. The humblest of humble places to reside, consisting of barely any furniture, hardly a floor, the only warmth coming from the fireplace, a bed if you're lucky, where you were only permitted to be in if you were sleeping. While Massa and his family were in the mansion. Yeah, that's not glamorous. These cottages that the enslaved people built, not luxurious. Not something to be romanticized.
They could hunt, they could fish, so they could buy for their own food, and they also built a hospital for them, and there was a doctor who would visit every week. The doctor trained one of the slaves to be a nurse to take care of them.
Oh, so you mean food, nourishment was not provided by Massa or his family or his cooks that he had. They, the enslaved people working for him, had to find their own sources of food and nourishment. Oh, and you mean a doctor would come and had the audacity to teach an enslaved person how to take care of the slaves because God forbid he do it. God forbid he do it. Did she get paid to be trained to take care of the enslaved people that he didn't want to touch? Doubt it. Oh, but it was so good. It was so good.
So for the readings that we have, it sounds like the slaves were treated fairly well.
You mean the readings that you're referencing that you've changed to make it look like and sound like slavery wasn't that bad?
As well as the slave can be treated, considering the conditions.
Funny how y'all don't talk about what those conditions were. Why don't y'all go into detail about the conditions of working in a sugar plantation as an enslaved person in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, and so forth and so on. Well into the 1970s. What were those conditions like, I wonder?
When the war ended, the majority of the slaves stayed here. We actually have descendants of the slaves who still work here.
Maybe that's because these enslaved people had no skills or money, jobs, food, housing to make a living for themselves outside of the plantation. Many of them were maimed from having worked on the sugar plantation in these brutal conditions. They were not allowed to read or write. It was illegal and would be unalived if found out that they could read or write. Many of them had sick and or dying parents whom they chose to stay and take care of because no one else would. They were not trained to do anything else, nor were anyone willing to employ them, white people in the South, to do anything other than work as sharecroppers on their farm for little to no pay. And it is not a flex to say you have descendants of those enslaved people still working on the plantation today. That is not a flex. That is not pretty amazing. It's sad and it's disgusting. I really hope if y'all ever visit any of these plantation tours that you don't take what these people have to say at face value. They are trying to romanticize and beautify the exploitation, genocide, and horrific violence that our ancestors faced. And this is recent ancestors. This is recent family members for many of us. And here we have this woman dressed up in what she thinks they would have worn back then, in her little floral frock, trying to talk about how it was so amazing for the slaves. How fucking dehumanizing. Y'all are weird.
Yeah, I was sad to see the Nottoway plantation burn.
Of course you were. Because you actually do not view what happened there as having happened to real human beings, as evidenced by this tone-deaf response. Every day one of you gets on this app and reminds us why you will never ever beat the racism allegations. Because the amount of people that I've seen saying, oh, that was my favorite plantation. What is wrong with you people? Do you think anyone in Germany has a favorite concentration camp? And the fact that you all think that plantations are these beautiful, picturesque places to hold weddings and events at shows how truly evil and diabolical you all are. You can't help it. So I'm happy that it burned to the ground. I wish the same fate for every last standing plantation, except for the Whitney plantation that does not hold weddings and they actually tell the truth about what happened there.
Yeah, I was sad to see the...
Last night, Nottoway plantation burned. And like the glutton for punishment that I am, I went to the comments. Now, of course, first and foremost, you have people rejoicing about it, right? And can you blame them, right? It's where their ancestors were tortured, right? Where they had lifetimes, plural, lifetimes of labor stolen from them. And then, of course, you have the people who look like me. Why do they always look like me? Who are screeching about history. And this is all I have to say to you. No, actually I have more, right? Just a little mini rant, right? Like, I'm a historian, right, of slavery. I wrote a book about it, and I can tell you that architectural history is not the history of building materials and things, right? It is the history of the builders. It is the history of the structures and how humans interact with those structures and how the presence of those structures affected the way that humans behave and interact with one another and their surroundings, right? You cannot talk about antebellum architecture as if it's the only, as if it's only like fancy wallpaper that is imported from Europe and Greek columns. Like, it's not. It is the enslaved people who built and sustained it, and the family of rancid racists living inside of it, right? Rancid racists who worked people to death and who sold off their own black children for profit. That is the architectural history of Nottoway. Anyway, that was just the side rant. Now here's the main rant, okay? The third type of comment that I desperately need to talk about, right? Which is the people who also almost always happen to look like me, right? That's why I have to make these videos, because they always look like me, who said that this fire is a great tragedy because the plantation homes remind us of the brutal history of slavery. They asked, would we be happy if Dachau or Auschwitz burned? And it's like, are you kidding me right now? Like, this shit manages to be more egregiously stupid than the second type of comment, right? Do people vacation at or have weddings at Dachau or Auschwitz? Like, they don't, right? They don't, right? People do not vacation at or have weddings at Dachau and Auschwitz, right? Concentration camps, because those places tell the truth of the atrocity that happened there, right? This plantation, it's not at all, right? It's waxing poetically about the European wallpaper, which means it did not preserve history, right? It preserved a fantasy of the past that conveniently strips away some of the most important history of our nation, right? The history of who built this country without compensation and whose ancestors are still paying for all of that. Days of glory. What is it, days of glory? There were no days of glory for this goddamn plantation. Like, I'm sorry. Excuse me for not crying about a fire.
This is the Nottoway Plantation in Louisiana. It is the largest antebellum house in the South.
And it is surprising that it's still standing, because if you don't know, most of the homes in the South, especially the plantation homes, were burned to the ground during the Civil War. So this home standing is important, I guess. But it's the largest one, because the owner was so wealthy. So it was built in 1859 by John Handon Randolph. He came from a family that was from Mississippi that were cotton farmers. They owned a plantation and they owned slaves. Okay. So they were, slave owning family that was able to make their money off of the backs of black people. There were 155 people that were registered that worked at this property. Now, I need to be very clear with people. 155 people that were listed. That does not mean, for any sense of the word, that that's the only people that were on that property. That just means that that's the people that they were willing to list as an asset. Now, this might have a little AI in it, but this is what it looks like currently, or at least a few hours ago. So it caught on fire, and we are also very happy about this. But let me explain, because people might think, oh, but it's history. You just said it's the largest house and it actually survived the Civil War. You would think. The reality is that most of the plantations in the United States are being currently used as a historical site where you can go have self-guided or tour-guided tours. And they are also doing weddings and proms at these places. Yes, you heard me correctly. Weddings. So I guess if you're morally bankrupt enough and you choose to go to one of these properties, you can decide to have your wedding there and dance on the ground that probably has the bones of slaves underneath it. Because if there's one thing I know about every single plantation tour I've been to, while they often have family cemeteries, I have never, not one time, seen a cemetery for the slaves. Not even the ones that they claim to love so much. So this is Boone Hall. Boone Hall is in North Carolina. This is also the location that Alex Haley's Queen was recorded in. There's like this circular staircase in the center that there's like this very famous scene that she comes down and she slides off of the banister. In that movie, Halle Berry is a mixed woman. And this is at the conclusion of the Civil War and what she has to go to. She's barely passable. And so she's treated a little bit differently, but she still finds out in the end that black is black to these people. This is also something else that is very, very famous for. These trees have been here forever, and it's very interesting. They actually have a network of roots underneath. They are all connected to each other. It's really kind of cool how they work, but this is also it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. The house is behind. This is going towards the exit. Now, the thing that bothers me the most about this is how, when you go to these tours, how they intentionally try to shine the turd of slavery and make it seem like it wasn't so bad. So on the other side of these trees, what is not pictured is there is a row over here of brick homes. And let me show those to you. They look like this. Now, at the very beginning, somewhere over here, or maybe unless the photo's flipped over there, at the beginning of one of these sides, there is a plaque for the self-guided tour, and you hit the button, it starts to talk to you, and it says, he loved his slaves so much that he would put them in here. And it was, when people would come down that long driveway and they would see these long row of brick homes and they were filled with happy, healthy slaves, they would assume that this person was a good slave owner. So here's my thing. People do not try to put on a facade for something unless they're trying to talk you into believing the opposite of who they are. So I have all reason to believe that this family was full of sexual assaulting rapists who are more than happy to beat and harm human beings. Let's just keep it what it is. We ended up not staying here very long because I was so fucking offended by the time that we got done. I couldn't sit there any longer. Almost on every one of those homes, there's a plaque of some kind because, like I said, they do self-guided tours as well as the tour-guided tours. This very first house was dedicated to their cook. Now you can pause this if you want to, and you can go ahead and read it through. There's only two things in this long plaque. They have her there because she was a cook and she was dedicated to the family, and they liked the way that she fed them. 90% of this plaque is she did all this stuff for us, and that's why we put her in that brick house. What I took away from it was this. Do you see how there's a question mark around her birth? Also, she was brought to Boone Hall in 1864, remained here as a cook until her death in 1936. She was the youngest of 18 children. So let me tell you the truth about the history that they aren't wanting to dive into. Her mother was probably at a breeding farm. Slaves were often, if they were fertile and producing good children, they would send them to breeding farms where they were chained to beds, sexually assaulted, held there until they birthed, and then repeated. The other thing is that they say that she remained here as the cook until her death in 1936. Understand there were a lot of slaves who didn't know where to go when slavery ended. They didn't know where to go. They had no idea, and they were still being treated poorly. North, south, east, west, black people were still being treated poorly. So many of them stayed. Also, there's no record of where this woman's buried. So she lived, worked, and died on this plantation, and this was the most that they could do for her. In addition to that fuckery, there were baskets that were, when you walked inside of the very first one, there were baskets on the table, and this was one of them. And like every little thing was pissing me off. Enslaved women were, by necessity, like they make it sound nice, were very resourceful. They weren't resourceful out of necessity of scarcity. They were resourceful out of necessity so they don't become unalived because there was something they couldn't do. Okay? They homespun fabric into clothes for their families and used these covered baskets to store their sewing things. It was just, now this is a Moses basket, and they try to make it sound like something it isn't. But the only thing that really bothered me in here that really pissed me off, do you see the slang in here? They're talking about a song that they sang for the basket, and they use this broken English because that's what they had to do to learn to speak to each other. They don't tell you that, right? None of that. Then they try to say there's another plaque, or maybe it was a button that you push, and you push the button. Yeah, it was a button push. And it starts to say the slaves were often treated better than even the owners were. They often had better clothing and better food than the slave owners because it was important for them to make sure that their property was taken care of. So they had full cabinets, fully closed, smiles on their faces. There was a wood burning area, for a fire and stuff like that. Like the lies that these people told. And then it got worse. At the very end of everything, there was this area where people were gathering around and they were listening to an elder black woman tell stories. They were talking over her. They were not listening to her. And I was getting very agitated. You see this lovely woman down here, and you see this Galagihi. The people that were brought to this area were coming from many different areas, and they had to develop their own language, and they melted customs and things like that, and they developed their own fucking culture and people outside of all of the bullshit of the South. If you see over here in the bottom down here, this is the area that they primarily were a part of, 3 states wide. Now, we had a woman who was doing this, and she was explaining to people slave songs and that why they were and why people used them and things, and nobody was fucking listening to this woman. And it was literally one of the most disrespectful fucking scenes I've ever seen. And so my husband and I had to leave immediately because I was going to start cussing people out. So in conclusion, the plantations that are left are problematic. Nobody needs to be having birthday parties and fucking weddings in these locations. It's disgusting. My ancestors are very happy that this very large house, which is just a symbol to the nastiness and grotesqueness of slavery, is burned to the ground. I don't think a single one of us give a fucking shit. Nobody should care. Nobody should care. We should be glad it's going to be gone. But I promise you the family's going to build something on this ashes, and then they're going to market that as another location to have weddings. Dancing on the graves of my ancestors.
The historic plantation called Nottoway Plantation has burnt to the ground. Some say the ancestors did this. Some are talking about this was a good thing, and many others are mad. But let's talk about the historical significance of this plantation right here. So this plantation was built between 1857 and 1859 by a wealthy owner by the name of John Hebden Randolph, who was a slave owner. He enslaved over 150 people to work on his sugar cane farm. So for generations, him and his family got a lot of money off of black labor, free black labor, enslaved labor. And in the modern day, a lawyer owns this plantation. They're doing nice resorts, making all this money. But again, maybe by the grace of God, maybe it was just the ancestors, but some revenge has been taken with the plantation burning down. That's what it looks like now.
Lord Jesus, it's a fire. Fire. Woo, 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 woo. Nottoway Plantation down there right underneath Baton Rouge, home to 150 some slaves, is burning to the ground. Thank you, ancestors. Mind you, people love this God-forsaken, evil-ass place. Look at this place, is the shit they got on this property, y'all. They got the nerve to call this fucking cursed ground a damn resort. It was owned by John Randolph. May he burn in hell continuously. And all his fucking family members. And I hope some of them on this page right now. I don't know if the ancestors wanted to remind us to keep up the good fight of faith or what. Nigga, I ain't never been so happy to see smoke billowing. God damn it. Look at the beautiful, beautiful footage. I know. Some of y'all say, Darian, this is a historical landmark. Fuck this historical landmark. Burn, baby, burn. That's where it's located. God bless you, ancestors. God knows I wish we could have been there to put some on the grill when this bitch burnt to the ground. Here's to many more burning up. Fire.
This plantation that actually got burnt down has just shown a lot. I actually stitched a video on my TikTok where I was actually reacting to the fact that a plantation got burned down, right? And some painkiller people, if not even all, no, let me just say some, we're all crying. We're all, oh my God. If you go to some comment section, you'll be shocked to the fact that the reason why they are so upset and they're so angry or so touching is the fact that the said plantation was actually used for leisure, for for wedding horrors, for like you could just name it but a few. So all of a sudden most of them were like, oh my God, the only historical fact that we all have left, like as if you cared. This was a plantation that so many things were done. And the first clip that I actually stitched, we're talking about how, oh my goodness, the owner of the plantation was so rich back then, even till date, and that he decided that he was going to buy the plantation and buy the families, and just so that the families would not be separated. Like these people just looks for a way to justify slavery. And what happened? These people always look for a way to, like, when I say white whatsoever, whitewash it. Not quite long, I think that was 2 days ago, no, yesterday, I posted a video where a British pan-colored woman came out on a live TV program, debunking and trying to make colonization look some type of way. She goes as far as to make a statement. She was like, although some people actually thought that them as white or British people colonizing Africa was a bad thing, but to her, she sees it as something that is very good, that she sees it as an avenue for development, that because of colonization, There was development, there was education, there was cleanliness. She mentioned other things, but what actually struck me was the fact that she mentioned cleanliness, which I elaborated so widely. She also mentioned education, like, you know, Africa getting your type of education doesn't mean that African people don't have their own type of education. Like, I don't just understand. You colonized people, you forced people to learn your own language that you fabricated. You forced people to follow your own curriculum, and all of a sudden you think that your own is better compared to theirs. So therefore, you brought education. Okay, let's not digress. She also talked about cleanliness. Cleanliness? Like, I know I'm digressing from this said plantation, but there is a place I'm coming. I'm going to land. She talked about how, oh my God, colonization brought about cleanliness. Oh, people that look like me. Without forgetting, like, she forgot that black people, even in 2025, is still teaching some people how to take a shower with a washcloth, how to properly moisturize and exfoliate your skin. Black people are still doing that in 2025. You know? But you are the person, you are the people, or colonization actually brought about cleanliness, oh, industrialization, oh, like the said plantation we are seeing today and how beautiful it is. There are people who built it. There are people who worked, who were enslaved. There are people who sacrificed everything. But the thing is that there are some people gaining right now. There are some people who actually gained from it, who is reaping the fruit of 400 years of enslavement. You know? And when people that look like me decide to like even open their mouth to talk about reparation, a lot, so many people have 1001 reason why they feel that, oh, what are you talking about? You don't deserve reparation. It's something that happens 1 million years ago. But now, people are crying for something that have been in existence over 400 years ago, got to do, you know? And people are like, oh my God, do you know how much? Oh, I actually thought that slavery happened 400 million years ago. So anybody asking for reparation does not even deserve it. But there are some people who are still profiting and benefiting from the hard works of the suffering of these people. But when you want to like the theater, now they are upset that people that look like me are jubilating to the fact that, you know, the plantation is no. That like that should, if they actually wanted to make it like a historical artifact like that they want to hold to heart, they shouldn't give room for maybe celebrating weddings, celebrating this and that and all of that. Oh my goodness, it is just giving you are profiting out of people's suffering. Not only that, you are fantastic, like it has every negative thing about it. So when people that looks like me, you know, jubilate or like, oh my God, let it burn or something, they are just saying that because there are people who has lost, there are some trapped, will I call it, souls in there that need to be freed. Like, because just imagine. Anyway, lovelies, wanna just leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please, lovelies, if you've not subscribed to this channel, do your girl a huge favor to click on the subscription button, like, and I will see you, lovelies, when I upload. Thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So if you've not subscribed to this channel, do your girl a huge favor to click on the subscription button, like, and I will see you love this when I upload the next one.